But why is Magna Carta so important? A flickering candle, a guiding star. And why has it taken 800 years for us to be told not to call it the Magna Carta, just Magna Carta? Nicholas Cowdery is a renowned QC and member of the Magna Carta Committee. And we can call it the Magna Carta Committee and still be correct, Nicholas?
Absolutely.
Why does this thing matter?
Well, it's a myth of history, and it's a myth with magical qualities, the idea of the Magna Carta. And you notice I said the Magna Carta. I can't see any reason why we should take the definite article away from it. The other words are just Latin that means big charter.
Doesn't mean the big charter?
No, it just means big charter.
I'm going to take your word for that.
And the reason why, it's very interesting to hear those grabs from politicians, because what document are they talking about? There were 8 different issues of the document that we collectively call the Magna Carta during the 13th century. It began with one in 1215, yes, on the 15th of June 1215, that was sealed, not signed, by King John at Runnymede on the River Thames. And it was not on parchment, it was on vellum, which is untanned animal skin, either from a calf or a sheep. And it was laboriously written by scribes in continuous medieval Latin script, with a lot of abbreviations because they had to get a lot of words onto the area of the vellum.
So it was a lot like a tweet
expensive.
of its time.
It took a bit longer than a tweet. I just happen to have here with me...
Here's one you prepared earlier.
One I prepared earlier.
A Magna Carta?
Just in case I was to appear.
So what in that is relevant today? I mean, is it, do those words appear in our laws, or do they underpin the vibe of the thing?
There is one chapter, which is the correct description, not clause, not article, one chapter of the Magna Carta of 1297, which is the version that actually became law in England, which is law in New South Wales. The Imperial Acts Application Act of 1969 declared that Chapter 29 of the 1297 version is law in New South Wales, and it still is. And it's a very important chapter because it's a contraction of chapters 39 and 40 of the 1215 document, if you want to trace it back through the 8 different versions, which ensures due process of law. And the phrase that you hear cited very often, to no one shall we deny, to no one shall we delay justice,
So were these things already understood and in practice, or was this document important because for the first time it actually said, this is how we will proceed from this point, these are effectively the equivalent of a Charter of Rights, if you will?
There's very little in it that was new at the time, very little. There are a few provisions that were novel, but for the most part it was declaring the pre-existing law of England and the usages of England, the common law, if you like. And the reason why it needed to be declared and to be reaffirmed was that naughty old King John had been ignoring it. And that had started in the time of his father, Henry II. And the merchants, the barons, the people of England became very concerned about the way in which the king was just riding roughshod over the law that had been accepted for centuries, at least back to the time of Henry I's coronation charter of 1100. And they needed to do something about it. It was a time of enormous economic activity in England, the 12th and 13th centuries, and people wanted the law to be settled and to be observed, and this was a way of forcing the king to do that.
At some point did it go to beyond simply reflecting the current arrangements to forming the basis of future arrangements? Did it have that sort of power to get put in a bottom drawer and never seen again for 799 years?
Well, the document that was sealed in 1215 was in force for 9 weeks.
Right.
So it's a bit late to have the 9-week anniversary. The reason for that was that King John never had any intention of honouring the obligations that he was taking on in the document. And he sent a messenger off to the Pope in Rome. Of course, the church at that time was the Roman Church. And the Pope annulled the Charter of Liberties, as it was called, on the 24th of August 1215. So it lasted about 9 weeks. Now that's not much of a track record for a document that was going to lay the foundation for civilization for the rest of eternity.
So would you say that it's been overhyped, or does it remain important?
No, it hasn't. It hasn't been overhyped for this reason, that the myth, the idea of Magna Carta remains essential, remains vitally important. And that myth, the idea behind it, is the establishment and the assertion of the rule of law, which we've since developed and built upon over the centuries. The interesting thing is that from 1300, when Edward first issued his version of Magna Carta, by then it was called Magna Carta, from then till the early 1600s, it disappeared. It just wasn't important in public life in England at all, until Sir Edward Coke in the early 1600s revived it, made it the feature piece of his second volume of the Institutes of the Laws of England.
And now it goes on world tour,
gave it a new
like
life.
a rock star. It's carried around the place like an artefact.
And there are so many versions of it, and they're not all exactly the same.